The small cafe buzzed with the familiar clinks of cups, low chatter, and the hiss of the espresso machine. Morning light slipped through the windows, painting golden lines across the wooden tables. Outside, the city was waking up, people moving, in hurried rhythms, but inside, time seemed to slow, especially for one man who walked in quietly, unnoticed by most. He wore a plain gray hoodie, faded jeans, and simple sneakers that had seen better days. He looked ordinary, invisible, even until he reached the counter. "Hi," the man said softly. "Just a regular coffee. Black, smallest size." The young barista behind the counter barely looked up from his phone. He was tall, slim, and had a swagger about him that made him seem older than he was. He wore the cafe's signature apron, a black one with embroidered gold lettering that read "The Brew Den." His name tag said Trey. Trey raised an eyebrow without making eye contact. "That's it." "Yes," the man replied. "Small coffee, please." Trey smirked and shook his head, muttering under his breath. "Cheapest item on the menu and probably won't tip either." The man heard it, but he didn't flinch. He just smiled softly behind him. A couple of other customers in suits chuckled. One of them whispered just loud enough. "Probably lost his job. Looks like he slept on a bench." The man didn't turn around. He reached into his pocket and pulled out some crumpled bills. He laid the exact amount for the coffee on the counter. "No more, no less." Trey rolled his eyes. "Wow, cash. Haven't seen that in a while." Still, the man stood patiently, unbothered by the passive insults swirling around him. He looked around the cafe like he was observing something special. The sunlight on the tiles, the wall filled with books and local art. The steam swirling in the air above the counter. "Name for the order?" Trey asked, tapping the touchscreen. "Sundar," the man said. Calmly, Trey paused, looking up for the first time. "Wait, Sundar?" He looked the man up and down and smirked. "Like Sundar Pichai? You know, the Google guy?" "Yes." The man nodded. Trey let out a short laugh and scribbled something on the cup. "Right, okay. Sundar." The woman in line behind him leaned over. "Well, if he's Sundar Pichai, I'm Oprah Winfrey," she joked. And the line behind them erupted into giggles. Sundar stepped aside and waited near the pickup counter. Still silent, still smiling. He didn't seem hurt, just distant, like his mind was somewhere else. Minutes passed. The barista called out, "Small black coffee for Mr. Google CEO." The sarcasm in his voice was unmistakable. Sundar picked up the cup. The name on it wasn't his. It read Mr. CEO, with a poorly drawn doodle. He said nothing. He simply walked to a quiet corner table, sat down and took a slow sip of his coffee. At another table near the window, a woman watched the scene unfold. Her name was Mia, a local school teacher who had come in to grade some papers before class. She had seen the entire exchange. Her eyes followed the man now seated in the corner, who pulled out a small notebook from his jacket and began writing. What struck her wasn't the insult or the mocking. It was the man's complete lack of reaction. It was as if he had heard it all before and chosen peace over pride. That kind of strength was rare. Mia stood, walked to the counter, and asked for another small black coffee. When Trey handed it to her, she said, "Make it to go. And write the correct name this time." Trey blinked. "What?" "His name is Sundar, not Mr. CEO. And it's not funny." He gave a half-hearted shrug. "Lady, the guy is clearly not Sundar Pichai." "You don't know who anyone is. You only know what they're wearing." With that, she took the coffee and brought it over to Sundar's table. "Excuse me," she said gently. "I saw what happened. I just wanted to offer this to you. Maybe a better cup. Or at least a properly labeled one." Sundar looked up. There was warmth in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, "but it's not necessary." "I know," she replied. "That's why I wanted to." He accepted the cup with a quiet nod. "You have a kind heart," Mia smiled. "Do you really work for Google?" "I do." "What do you do there?" He looked down at his coffee. I help people solve problems. And sometimes I listen. Before she could ask more, her phone buzzed. She had to go. Class was starting soon. Well, whoever you are, I'm glad I met you this morning, she said. And I'm glad someone still sees people. He replied, got outside in the parking lot. One of the suited men from earlier laughed as he held up his phone. Dude, I recorded the whole thing. Wait until I upload this. Homeless man pretends to be tech CEO over coffee. It's gonna go viral. Back inside, Trey leaned on the counter, chuckling. Man, that guy's something else. Bet he doesn't even have a phone. Just then, Sundar stood, finished his coffee, and walked back to the counter. He placed the empty cup down gently. Thank you for the coffee. Trey nodded dismissively. Sure. Oh, one more thing, Sundar said. He pulled out slim leather wallet and took out a card. It was matte black, simple and unfamiliar to Trey. Then he laid it on the counter. I'd like to leave a tip. Trey blinked. Okay. How much? Sundar typed something into the touch screen with calm precision. Trey stared at the screen. Then his mouth dropped open. Wait, is this a joke? He asked Dot, but Sundar was already walking out the door. On the screen, it read, tip $10,000. The cafe went silent. Dot people froze mid-sip, mid-sentence. Mid-laugh. Trey shouted, Wait, sir, wait. But Sundar kept walking, his steps slow, steady, and deliberate. Someone ran outside and pointed a phone camera at him. Hey, who are you really? He turned just once and said, just someone who values kindness more than coffee. And then he disappeared into the morning light. Back inside the cafe. People swarmed Trey, phones out, voices buzzing. Mia returned moments later, having forgotten her notebook. She found the place in chaos. Trey looked like he had seen a ghost. The suited men were silent now, their smug faces replaced by disbelief. What happened? Mia asked. An old man at a nearby table whispered, That was Sundar Pichai, the real one. She stared at him. How do you know? I worked with him once, years ago, in India. I never forget faces. Mia slowly sat down. He said he helped people solve problems. The man nodded. And he just helped this cafe learn one of the most important lessons. Mia opened her notebook and, without thinking, wrote at the top of the page, You never know who's listening, or watching, or forgiving. And deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. Asterisk, the city kept moving, unaware of the quiet ripple that had just begun inside that little coffee shop. Outside, the streets buzzed with the sound of morning traffic, bicycle bells, and the occasional bark of a dog. But inside the brew den, nothing felt the same anymore. The air felt heavier. The silence lingered even after Sundar had walked away. Trey stood behind the counter frozen, eyes glued to the touchscreen, still displaying that staggering number. $10,000. It wasn't a mistake. He had checked it 3 times. The card wasn't fake. It processed cleanly, instantly. He even received a confirmation text on the shop's terminal. He hadn't even offered the man a receipt. He tipped $10,000? Someone whispered from the back of the line. Another voice followed. Who does that? And then a woman added, someone who's worth billions. Slowly, the pieces began to click for people who had once mocked him just moments earlier. The hoodie, the gentle smile, the name, the calm, the minimal order, the refusal to retaliate, and finally, that simple black card. They realized it wasn't just any man pretending to be someone important. It was someone important pretending to be no one. In the back corner of the cafe. The manager, Rita, emerged from her office. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-40s with dark curly hair tied in a bun, glasses perched on her nose, and a clipboard almost permanently attached to her arm. She had been going over inventory until she heard the sudden eruption at the front. What's going on? She asked, approaching Trey, whose face was drained of color. He couldn't speak. He just pointed to the screen. Rita leaned over and saw the tip amount. She stared for a moment, unsure if it was a prank or a glitch. Who did this? She asked slowly. Trey swallowed hard. The guy, the one in the hoodie. Said his name was Sundar. Rita straightened. Wait, Sundar? As in Sundar Pichai? Trey nodded slowly. She looked around. Where is he? Gone. She closed her eyes for a long breath. Then she turned to the room. Does anyone have a photo? Did anyone speak with him? A man near the window raised his hand. I recorded part of it. I thought he was a crazy person. I feel like an idiot. Now, he played the clip. Sundar at the counter. Trey laughing. The other customer sneering. The sarcastic voice calling out Mr. CEO. And finally, Sundar calmly thanking everyone before leaving. Rita watched it, her face tightening. Then she turned to Trey. You're going to write him a letter. And then you're going to take a week off. Unpaid. Wait, what? Trey protested. He didn't even say he was offended. He didn't need to. Rita snapped. He left us all with a lesson. We don't treat anyone like that. Especially not someone who walks in asking for the cheapest item on the menu. We show respect to every single human being who walks through our doors. Mia had been standing quietly nearby. Now she stepped forward. Asterisk. I spoke to him, she said. Rita turned. You did? Yes. He was kind, warm, and didn't care about how he was treated. I think he just wanted to see how people would act when they didn't think he was important. Rita nodded, and now the world will know how we acted. News spread quickly. By that evening, the video had made its way onto social media platforms. A local influencer shared it with a caption that read, "When you mock the wrong man in a hoodie." In just 4 hours, it had been viewed over 500,000 times. By morning, major news outlets were picking it up. Headlines ranged from tech billionaire humbled a cafe without saying a word, Google CEO's undercover coffee run teaches brutal lesson, a $10,000 tip, a cheap coffee, and a viral act of humility, but none of the headlines captured the full weight of the moment. None of them knew what Sundar had written in his notebook that morning, or the reason he walked into that cafe in the first place. And only one person had the slightest clue. Mia. Later that night. Mia sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open and her notebook beside her. She kept going back to her short exchange with Sundar. Something about it lingered. He hadn't looked at her like a stranger. He had looked at her like someone who understood, like someone who had seen things and felt things that most people wouldn't believe. She Googled his name, of course. Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google and Alphabet. Net worth of over $1 billion. Born in India, had a humble childhood. Came from nothing. Always known for his humility and quiet brilliance. But there were no stories like the one she had just witnessed. No records of him walking into random coffee shops without security. No press appearances where he tested people's character. Nothing like what she had seen with her own eyes. And then she remembered what he had said when she gave him the coffee. I help people solve problems. And sometimes I listen. She kept repeating that line in her head. And suddenly it didn't sound like a description of a job. It sounded like a mission across the city. Sundar was staying at a modest boutique hotel under a different name. He sat in the small lobby with a steaming cup of tea, a leather notebook open on his lap. He had written 3 pages already. But now he paused. He looked up at the concierge, a young man named Joseph who had greeted him with warmth and without judgment, despite his ordinary appearance. You've been very kind to me, Sundar said. Joseph smiled. You're easy to be kind to, sir? Most people only offer kindness to those who look like they can offer something in return. Joseph laughed softly. Well, I guess I'm not most people. Sundar nodded, then flipped a page in his notebook. He wrote, kindness without expectation is the rarest currency. He didn't know why he'd chosen this city. He had traveled to many places, met thousands of people, sat in countless boardrooms, spoken on massive stages, helped shape the future of technology. But this time, he wasn't here as a CEO. He wasn't here to make deals or give speeches. He was here to see something, to remember something, to test. something, and maybe to find something he'd lost. The next morning, Sundar returned to the cafe. This time, he wore a dark blue jacket over his hoodie and a baseball cap pulled low. He sat at the same corner table, notebook open, pen in hand on it. The cafe hadn't opened yet, but the cleaning staff were already inside. One of them was an older woman named Helen, who had worked there for over 10 years. She didn't speak much, mostly because nobody asked, but Sundar did. "Good morning," he said gently. "How long have you worked here?" She turned surprised. "Me? Oh, too long. What keeps you here?" She paused, looking at the mop in her hand. "My daughter. She's in nursing school. I clean so she can learn." Sundar smiled. "That's noble." "No," she said. "It's necessary." He wrote something else in his notebook. Before she could ask anything, Rita entered. She was startled to see him sitting there. "You came back," she said softly. "I did." "Why?" Sundar closed his notebook. "Because sometimes people deserve a second chance to see the world differently." Rita sat down opposite him. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept. "I want to apologize," she said, "on behalf of my team. We were rude, disrespectful, and blind." "You don't need to apologize," Sundar replied. "You need to listen." She blinked. "Listen to what?" "To the way people speak, to the silences between their words, to how they treat others when no one is watching, and most importantly, to those who have no voice." Rita looked down. "I've been so focused on numbers, customers, profits, I forgot about people." Sundar smiled. "You're not alone. Most do." He slid something across the table. It was a second check. "What is this?" she asked. "A donation," he said. "For your staff, every one of them. From the baristas to the cleaners." Rita opened the envelope and gasped. Inside was a check for $150,000. Sundar stood up, notebook in hand. "I have to go," he said. "Will you come back?" He looked around the room one last time. Maybe someone else will. He walked out. Mia stood by the entrance. She had returned, curious to see if he would come again. He saw her, smiled, and said, "I'm glad you still see people." And then he was gone. Again, but not for long, because the story was just beginning. And in part 3, someone from Sundar's past would appear. With a secret that would change everything. Asterisk the following day. The world outside the cafe continued its usual rhythm, but inside the brew den, nothing felt usual anymore. Every barista walked a little straighter. Every customer was greeted with an extra ounce of attention. And Trey, now absent due to his forced time off, had become the subject of endless online debates, memes, and think pieces. But for Sundar, none of that mattered. He hadn't returned to make a point. He hadn't come back to be a spectacle. He hadn't even cared about being recognized. In fact, he preferred not to be. He came because there was something deeper he was chasing, something more personal, more buried than anyone could guess. Back at his hotel, Sundar sat in the rooftop garden, alone. The sky was overcast, and the breeze carried the scent of coming rain. In his lap was the same weathered notebook, its pages now filled with handwritten thoughts, sketches of cafe layouts, names of people he'd met, and questions he couldn't yet answer. But today, his pen hovered above a new name. Vijay. He hadn't heard that name in years. Yet this morning, when he opened his inbox, an account only a handful of people in the world had access to, there was a message that shook him. Subject: "You don't know me anymore, but I never forgot you." From VIJAY_72@email.com. The message was short, strange, almost like a puzzle. "I saw the video. I know it's you. I'm in the city, working nearby. Meet me where we used to sit under the neem tree. You remember? If you've changed, don't come. If you haven't, I'll wait." Sundar's hands trembled slightly as he folded the laptop closed, not out of fear, but out of something harder to name, something between guilt and longing. V. IJAY had been more than a friend. He was the only other person who knew the version of Sundar that existed long before Silicon Valley, before algorithms, before headlines. Back when life was about surviving day to day, sharing textbooks, eating from one lunchbox, and dreaming about changing the world from the floor of a dusty classroom. But something had happened, something that broke that friendship in a way neither of them had spoken of again. Until now. By afternoon, Sundar found himself walking into a quiet industrial neighborhood, far from the polished steel and glass of downtown. The sidewalks here were cracked, the paint on the buildings chipped, and yet there was a strange sense of nostalgia as he turned a corner and saw a lonely tree, surrounded by old warehouses. Its trunk gnarled and leaning slightly to one side. It wasn't a neem tree, but it didn't matter. The intention was. Understood. Beneath it sat a man on a wooden crate, sipping from a plastic bottle of water. He was older now, of course. Hair graying, skin darker from sun exposure, eyes deeper from years of things unsaid. But Sundar recognized him instantly. Vijay looked up and smirked. You came? Of course I did, Sundar said, stepping closer. I'm still me. I wasn't sure. They stood in silence for a moment, the years between them hanging in the air like heavy smoke. You look tired? Vijay said. I am. That's what billions get you, huh? Sundar laughed softly. They get you problems no one wants to hear about. And yet, here you are, pretending to be a nobody in coffee shops. I wasn't pretending. I just stopped needing to be somebody. Vijay nodded. So, why now? I don't know, Sundar said truthfully. Maybe I just needed to see if the world still had kindness, or if I still had the courage to seek it. DJ reached into his coat and pulled out a folded newspaper. He held it up. On the front page, under the local news section, was a headline. Man in hoodie leaves $10,000 tip at café. Is this Google's Sundar Pichai? So, you still make news, Vijay said, even when you're trying not to. I didn't do it for news? Then why? Sundar sighed, sitting on the curb beside him. Because sometimes power can make you forget. Forget what pain feels like. Forget what rejection looks like. Forget the taste of judgment. I needed to. Remember, DJ watched him closely. Do you remember what you forgot about me? Sundar turned. The question struck deeper than he expected. There was a memory he had avoided for too long. A decision he made that felt necessary at the time, but selfish in hindsight, back when they were both applying for scholarships to study abroad. Only one slot was left. Both had qualified. Both deserved it, but Sundar had been chosen, and Vijay had been left behind. At the time, he said nothing, but his silence said everything. I should have called, Sundar said now, voice cracking. You didn't owe me that. I did. You were my brother. Vijay shook his head. We all made choices. You followed your path. I stayed behind. I didn't have your mind, your timing, or your hunger. No, Sundar replied. You had all of that. And more? I just didn't fight for you the way you once fought for me. Vijay's face softened. So why come back now? Because I saw someone get humiliated for nothing more than looking poor, and it reminded me of us. Of what we faced, and of how close I came to becoming the very thing I swore I never would. Vijay leaned back against the tree. So what now? I don't know yet, Sundar whispered. But I want to start by fixing things, by helping people like we used to dream about, and maybe by starting with you. Meanwhile, back at the brew den, Mia had taken it upon herself to start a project. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need it. She just started doing what she knew had to be done. She printed out Sundar's quote, kindness without expectation is the rarest currency, and pinned it to the corkboard above the register. She created a list titled Coffee Fund for anyone who walked in and couldn't afford a drink. Donations poured in within hours. She began training sessions for all the baristas on empathy, listening, humility. It wasn't mandatory. But everyone showed up. The cafe began to transform. Slowly. humbly into something deeper than just a place. For caffeine, it became a place for second chances, and just as the changes were being felt, just as the conversations were starting to matter, Rita got a call from an unfamiliar number. Hello? Is this Rita, manager at the Brew Den? Yes, this is Sarah Alvarez. I work with Pichai. Rita nearly dropped the phone. Would like to speak with you? And he'd like to bring someone with him tomorrow. Someone from his past. Do you have time to meet? Rita barely found the words. Yes, absolutely. Anytime. Great, 9 a.m. sharp. As the call ended, Rita sat at her desk, staring into space. Just days ago. Her café was another forgettable stop on the morning commute. Now. It was about to become the center of something extraordinary. And yet, what she didn't know was that the person Sundar was bringing was someone whose idea could change not just their café, but thousands of lives. Starting with a single, simple idea. That kindness could be engineered. The morning sun rose slowly, casting long golden rays across the quiet street in front of the Brew Den. It was only 8:30 a.m., but inside the cafe, the staff were already gathered in a half circle. Nervous energy filled the room like static. Even the espresso machine hissed more softly than usual. Rita stood by the counter, smoothing the collar of her blouse every few seconds. She'd never prepared for a visit like this before. Not from someone whose name had been on the front pages of every major publication for the past 48 hours. Not from someone who had quietly transformed their cafe from a neighborhood spot into a national headline. Just by ordering the cheapest drink and choosing kindness instead of confrontation, everyone. Please be respectful, Rita said, her voice a mix of nerves and authority. Remember, this isn't just about who he is. It's about what we represent now. A second chance, Mia said gently from the corner. Rita nodded. Exactly. Outside, two figures approached. One, tall, in a clean but simple jacket and jeans, his cap tilted slightly forward. Beside him walked another man, slightly older in appearance, his eyes scanning everything as if trying to memorize it. Neither wore anything flashy. There was no entourage, no press. Just Sundar Pichai and Vijay. The bell of the door jingled, and all movement inside the cafe stopped. Sundar took a slow step inside, removing his cap as he did. Vijay followed behind, his posture quieter but dignified. Their entrance wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was felt by every soul in the room. Rita walked forward. Mr. Pichai, she said, offering her hand. Just Sundar, please. He smiled, shaking it warmly. He then turned to Mia. And you must be the one who stood up when no one else did. Mia nodded. I only did what anyone should. Maybe, Sundar said. But often, it's the smallest voice in the room that holds the greatest power. He turned to introduce Vijay. This is my old friend. We've reconnected. And he has something he'd like to share. Vijay stepped forward, shy at first, then found his footing. I'm not a billionaire, he began, and I'm not here because of fame or fortune. I'm here because once Sundar and I made a promise. We were kids, studying under street lamps in Chennai. We had one textbook between us. We shared it, and a dream that if one of us ever made it, we'd reach back and lift others too. He paused. The cafe was silent, hanging on his every word. Well, he made it, and now he's keeping his promise. Not just to me, but to all of you. There were a few quiet gasps. Rita looked towards Sundar, who nodded. Double quotes. I asked Vijay. Sundar said what he would do if he could design anything in the world, and he didn't talk about apps or profits or patents. He said, I'd create places where people are seen again. He looked around the cafe, and this place could be the first. What followed was something no one expected. Sundar and Vijay laid out an idea, something bold, transformative yet stunningly simple. They would invest in transforming the Brew Den into the first prototype of what they called human cafes. Not chain cafes, not luxury coffee experiences. Human CAF to the where pricing was based on trust, where customers could pay what they could, and those who had more could pay forward, where every employee received empathy training, mental health support, and profit shares, where struggling students could sit for hours without being judged, and janitors could be honored for their stories, not their uniforms. A place where kindness was built into the business model, a living organism of compassion. And the first would begin. Here, at the very cafe that once mocked a man for ordering a cheap drink. A cafe that now had the chance to lead a global movement. At first, not everyone believed it. A barista named Lucas whispered to Mia, "It sounds beautiful. But people will take advantage. Someone will abuse it." "Maybe," Mia said. "But someone will also be saved." That line stuck in his head for days. And the weeks that followed. Everything changed. Construction crews arrived not to tear the place down, but to rebuild it with care. The interior was redesigned with community tables instead of isolated seating. A new corner was carved out for a no-judgment zone, filled with books, headphones, and sketch pads for people who just needed space to be. A pay-it-forward board was installed near the register. Each pin was a story, small notes from strangers who'd covered someone's coffee or meal. Some said things like, "For the woman crying yesterday, I saw you, and I hope this helps." Others wrote, "For the kid who looked too nervous to ask." People began leaving more than money. They left hope. And hope, it turned out, was contagious. Vijay, now part of the founding team, trained staff on a different philosophy. He held evening workshops not just about customer service, but about serving with soul. He told stories of his life of mopping school floors to help his mother, of watching friends become invisible just because they wore old shoes. "You can learn someone's name," he told the staff, "but learning someone's silence? That's where the real work begins." One night, after a long shift, he and Mia sat outside, watching a young couple pin a note to the board. "You think this can really last?" she asked. "I think," he replied, "it has to." Meanwhile, Sundar stayed in the background. He didn't return for applause or recognition. He was there to observe, to learn, and to quietly ensure the systems being built were scalable, ethical, and replicable. He hired a small team of engineers not to develop software, but to design digital infrastructure that can help other cafes adopt the same model. Data tracking systems that recorded kindness metrics, not just sales. Interfaces that told real-time stories of generosity, hardship, and gratitude. And in an even quieter move, he set up a fund, the VJ Foundation. Its goal was simple: support underserved entrepreneurs who wanted to open their own human cafes around the world. But just as the momentum began to grow, trouble came. Not from outside. But from someone inside. One night, Trey returned. It had been weeks since his suspension. He had stayed quiet, embarrassed, as the internet tore apart his behavior. He received messages ranging from hate to offers for interviews. But he had ignored them all. Now, standing in front of the cafe that had become something entirely new, he felt like a stranger. Even the lights inside seemed warmer. He walked in. Heads turned. Mia looked up. Surprised. Rita stepped forward cautiously. But before anyone could speak, Trey raised his hand. "I know I'm not supposed to be here," he said, his voice shaking. "And I understand if you ask me to leave. But I need to say something." No one moved. "I was wrong," he continued. "Not just about Sundar. About everyone. I judged people by what they wore, what they ordered. I thought kindness was weakness. I thought sarcasm made me smart." He paused, voice breaking. "But the day he tipped me, it ruined me in the best way. It made me question who I've been for years, and I want to help now, even if it means sweeping the floor. Even if it means starting at zero." Rita stepped back. It wasn't her place to decide. All eyes turned to VJ. He walked forward slowly. Looked Trey in the eye and said, "Then start with the dishes." No applause. No forgiveness speech. Just a chance. And sometimes that's all a person needs. That night, Sundar returned once more. He sat at the farthest corner. sipping his usual small black coffee dot this time. Trey brought it over personally. Place the cup down gently. No doodles, he said. Just your name. Spelled right. Sundar smiled. Thank you. No, Trey whispered. Thank you. Across the room, Mia leaned over and pinned a final note to the board. This cafe saved me, and I don't even drink coffee. Sundar read it, then looked around. The room at faces now familiar, hearts now open, and a place that was once just another stop on a daily routine. Now glowing with purpose, he thought back to the day he walked in as a nobody. He thought back to the mockery, the laughter, the cheap coffee dot, and now he knew this wasn't the end dot, it was the beginning, because in part 5, a corporate rival would try to destroy what they built, and Sundar would have to make a choice, protect his name, or protect the movement. Asterisk, it had been 32 days since. Sundar first walked into the brew den in that unassuming gray hoodie and ordered the cheapest coffee on the menu. 32 days since he was mocked, misjudged, and dismissed only to leave a tip that would change everything in just over a month. The cafe had transformed from a forgettable stop on people's morning routes to a beacon of empathy, storytelling, and innovation. What started with one act of unexpected generosity had blossomed into a new kind of business, a new kind of movement. But success, even when rooted in goodness, doesn't come without its enemies, especially when that success begins. To make the wrong people feel threatened. In a towering building across the city, the offices of Grindhouse Global buzzed with activity. The company operated one of the largest coffee chains in the country. Their name was synonymous with speed, efficiency, and profit. They had thousands of locations. They had marketing budgets larger than some cities, and they didn't like disruption, especially not from a small, independently owned cafe that had suddenly gone viral, stealing headlines. Customers, and now potential franchisees. Harold Brinkman, the CEO of Grindhouse Global, was a man known more for his boardroom aggression than his ability to taste coffee. He wore suits that cost more than most people's rent and had a talent for spinning bad press into growth strategies. But this new human cafe model had rattled him. He stood in front of a screen showing a news segment. The anchor said, "The Brew Den has redefined what it means to serve a community, launching a new wave of what are now being called human cafes. With backing from Sundar Pichai and a foundation dedicated to scaling the model, this may mark the biggest cultural shift in the food and beverage space in a decade." Harold turned to his executive team. "We're not letting this go unchallenged. This Sundar character thinks he can upend an entire industry with one emotional stunt. Let's remind him what happens when you challenge Goliath." He paused, then smiled coldly. "I want that coffee gone yesterday." The attack didn't come. With lawsuits. It came quietly, surgically. First, anonymous negative reviews flooded the Brew Den's online listings. Fake complaints, exaggerated claims, photos taken out of context. Next came the health inspector, showing up 3 times in a single week, citing obscure violations that had never been enforced before. One visit even forced a partial closure. And then came the whisper campaigns. Local business owners started pulling back from their collaborations. Donations to the Pay It Forward board slowed. Anonymous emails warned investors and the VJ Foundation to be cautious of where they placed their support. It was strategic. And it was working. Rita gathered the team one evening after closing. The once vibrant energy in the cafe felt dim, clouded by confusion and stress. "I don't know what's happening," she admitted, voice tight with worry. "But we're under fire, and it's not organic." BJ, leaning against the wall, looked deep in thought. "Someone's trying to sabotage the movement." Mia stood with arms folded, a trace of anger in her expression. "Why? We're just trying to do good." "Because," Sundar's voice came from the corner, quiet but firm, "when kindness starts to outperform power, power fights back." Everyone turned to him. "We're not just selling coffee," he continued. "We're offering something. The old systems can't. connection, dignity, hope, and they can't monetize that. He paused, thinking deeply, which is why we need to be smarter and faster. The next morning, Sundar met with his private advisory team engineers, ethical strategists, storytellers. Not corporate giants, but people he trusted to build things with heart. They gathered in a modest co-working space with whiteboards and post-its, coffee mugs, and laptops glowing. He outlined his vision. We don't fight their fire with fire. We don't sue. We don't smear. We show. Show what? Asked an analyst. Proof, Sundar replied. That kindness scales. That human cafes can survive even when under attack. And that we're not here for fame or profit. We're here to stay. He instructed them to fast-track the launch of a digital platform, KindNet. It would be a free open-source system any cafe in the world could use. It included a transparency dashboard to show real-time financials, donations, and distributions training modules on empathy, trauma awareness, and inclusive customer service, and map of pay-it-forward locations so people in need could find help easily, and most importantly, a daily story hub highlighting one act of kindness per cafe, but then flood the internet with fake reviews. Sundar said, we'll flood it with real humanity. As the brew den faced mounting pressure, something unexpected began to happen. The community showed up. Not in tweets. Not in headlines. But in person. An old man came in with a tin of cookies and a $20 bill. I heard you're having a rough time. These are for the staff. A single mother pinned a note to the board. I'm broke. I can't donate money, but I can offer rides to anyone who needs a lift after closing. A teenage boy offered to play his violin on the weekends for customers. I just want people to feel something, he said. And then on a Wednesday afternoon, a man in a suit walked in and said, I run a law firm down the street. My wife and I cried watching what you've built. If anyone tries to take this place down, you'll have the best defense money can't buy. Pro bono. Each act, small on its own, added up to something undeniable. Resistance. Not loud. Not violent, but rooted in something deeper than outrage. It was loyalty. Yet, behind the scenes, the attacks escalated. Harold from Grindhouse Global wasn't done. He made a call. It's time to discredit Sundar directly. His plan? Dig into Sundar's past. Find anything, emails, business choices, old interviews that could be twisted. And if nothing existed, fabricate something believable. A scandal. A leak. A reason to doubt his sincerity. We need to remind the public, Harold said to his PR team, that no one stays perfect forever. Back at the brew den, Vijay sensed the storm approaching. He met Sundar late that night in the same rooftop garden where the journey had started. They're coming for you next. Vijay warned. I know, Sundar said. So what's the plan? Sundar didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up at the sky. It was dark, scattered with stars, some barely visible behind the glow of the city. What if, he said slowly, we let them? What if I let the world believe the worst about me? Just long enough to protect this. What are you talking about? If they attack me, this cafe, the movement might survive. But if they destroy the model itself, we lose everything. You're willing to fall on the sword? I already have everything I need, Sundar replied. But the people, here, they're just getting started. Vijay stared at him. You'd give up your reputation to protect this? Sundar nodded. Yes. And just then, a phone buzzed. An email arrived. The subject line read, Leaked Documents. Sundar Pichai's secret project. Raises eyebrows. The first shot had been fired. By morning. Every news station would cover it. Social media would rage. And Sundar would disappear. Not out of fear, but because the final test had begun. Asterisk. Morning broke differently. It didn't bring peace. It brought noise. Buzzing phones. Headlines flashing. Inboxes overflowing. Sundar Pichai accused of manipulating grassroots movement for personal brand growth. Leaked memos suggest cafe concept part of a long-term PR strategy. Is the Kindness Cafe just a tech billionaire's clever marketing stunt? The internet was ablaze. Dot clips from old interviews were twisted, emails taken out of context. One message from over a decade ago, where Sundar casually discussed ethical branding with a colleague, was now headlining every thread, used as proof that the brew den and the human cafe idea were carefully calculated for image rehabilitation. In truth, the message was a fragment, written at a time when Sundar was navigating the early ethical responsibilities of leading a global tech empire. But now it had been surgically extracted and distorted, made to look like evidence of manipulation. As the chaos unfolded, Sundar was nowhere to be found. He didn't issue a statement. He didn't post a tweet. He didn't attend meetings. He simply vanished. At the brew den. The atmosphere was heavy with fear and confusion. The same journalists who had once called it a revolution now questioned its integrity. Influencers who had praised the cafe only days ago now deleted their posts or issued neutral statements. Even local news anchors speculated whether the cafe had been part of Optic's campaign. The kindness board, once overflowing with colorful pinned notes, sat nearly empty. Donations slowed. A few regulars stopped coming, and employees began whispering among themselves. Rita called an emergency staff meeting. She stood in front of the team, shoulders squared, voice unshaken. I don't care what they say, she began. I saw what happened in this room. I saw what kindness did, what humility did, what second chances did. You all saw it too.